Hey, we're back. Hi. I'm in Texas. So, um, so, yeah. I have had multiple people talk to me and say, Dan, start back up some of your video blogs. Um, and I'm like, okay, fine. We'll do a couple. We'll see what happens. I'm really surprised that people, I guess, seem to enjoy some of the stuff that I did from New York. If you haven't seen any of those, or you've just wandered into this from who knows where, my name's Dan. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for almost 20 years now. Most of that time in nursing has been in emergency medicine, also some ICU, some behavioral health, so a good chunk of critical care transport. Um, but for the most part, I've been an ER nurse for that. So that has been the preponderance of what I've done. But I'm lucky enough that I'm strong enough that I can work just about anywhere except birth and babies. I don't want nothing to do with birth and no babies. Nothing. Other than that, I do okay. So, I live and work in the central Ohio area. Grew up in southeastern Ohio. um, Still work with the health system there in Columbus. And there I am in a flex position, which means I go to whatever hospital they may have a need at on a particular day and try to put out fires and be helpful as best I can in whatever role they need me to fill. So, so back at the very start of April, end of March, New York, thanks to the COVID crisis, was in really bad shape. And I went with some other folks that I know, and we went to New York, and I worked in New York public, in the city hospital system. And it was quite an experience. I lived in a hotel in Manhattan. Um, I was like a block away from Central Park. I was a little catty corner from, um, out the window of my hotel room, I could see, Broadway and the Colbert Theater. I was literally right across the street from Carnegie Hall. Um, I got to see Times Square with nobody in it. I got a picture of myself next to the bowl on Wall Street with nobody else around. It was quite a surreal experience. And so, and then there was all just the healthcare issues, which, I've documented pretty extensively, and I'm sure we're going to be revisiting and talking about some of these things and some of the context of them over the next who knows however many of these things that I do. But if you have specific questions about any of that, however much detail you want or don't want, drop me a note. I'm happy to discuss about anything. As a matter of fact, I think some of the more interesting conversations that we've had have been things that people have asked me something about, and it spurred me to have a conversation in this format about what I'm doing and what we've done and the things that I've seen. So please do ask me what you want to ask. Worst thing that happens is I'm sleepy and I forget about it, and then it just kind of disappears. But so I was there in New York until mid-May, and then I could have stuck around a little longer, but things were pretty much under wraps at that point. I think that the response from the health community was pretty profound there. I think that people were able to get in there and do a couple of things to help those folks out a lot. For as bad as it was, it could have been much worse. So that's a blessing. But I got out of there. I went ahead and went home. I quarantined. I was able to, get healthy, see my kids, spend a little bit of me time, and then get back to helping out my local obligations there with work and healthcare. In this whole time, I've been kind of watching the COVID crisis limp along, and Unfortunately, many of the things that we have feared that could happen and might happen are happening. All of these places that have maybe not been as proactive with methods and practices to stave off coronavirus have had this slow building fire that is now burnt out of control, and it's causing major problems. I recall talking about some of my fears when I was in New York about the timeline being adjusted. And so we initially thought the preponderance of information that we had in the medical community was that this all kind of popped up right, I guess, at the end of November, start of December in Wuhan, China, and quickly spread very aggressively. And then by the time we got into early January, we started seeing a lot of really scary stuff. And people were leaking out, and they had people in Europe, in Italy, in the Pacific Northwest of America, who had let the genie out of the bottle and things had spread. That was the initial thought of what was happening. Turns out that maybe that this thing was a little older, maybe by a couple of months older than we thought that it was, which meant that this thing didn't build quite as quickly or quite as obviously as we can see it, as we thought that it was doing. So that's good and bad. It's good because you don't want to see something that spreads so rapidly, so quickly, that you just don't have the ability to keep up with it. At the same time, if something builds quickly and it spreads quickly, you're able to see it, you're able to trace it very easily, and that changes the way that you can go about combating it. So if something is that easy to trace and it's that virulent, you know pretty quick if you've got it under control. When you have something that builds more slowly, builds more insidiously, it's not always easy to know if you have it contained or not, and you have to be vigilant over a longer period of time. We have failed in this, and I think that's about as bluntly as I can put it. We had a lot of people all over the South, all over the Midwest, all over America. It's been worse in some places than in others, but people have been like, oh, there's no problem here. This is all blown out of proportion. This is political. You can think, feel whatever you want. The simple facts of this are is that this virus doesn't give a shit about your politics. And it's, in some ways, it's very rapid moving. In other ways, it's kind of stealthy, and it'll sneak up on you. And that's exactly what it's been doing. And all of these folks who have refused to wear masks, and by God, they're not going to stand for this tyranny, and they're going to own libs by going out and, eating at Cracker Barrel and sneezing on somebody one table over, they're going to prove that they're right. And over and over and over and over again, they're proving that they're idiots. Here we are in the state of Texas, which is about as, it's the prototypical American state for bravado, and and then that's kind of cool. You got literally a bunch of cowboys down here, but you also have a bunch of people who have not taken the kind of precautions that they need to take. You have people in government who have publicly distanced themselves from taking some of those precautions. Now you're seeing a relatively obvious and aggressive about face. This morning, as I was getting up to get ready for work and go out and do my my orientation for my new facility and my role here, it was announced that Texas now has a mandatory mask order. If you're out and about, you got to wear a mask. So it's going to be interesting to see how people who want to make this a political issue, how they spin Texas, the most prototypically macho state in America, their governmental structure, which is decidedly not lib, how they can wrap their head around the fact that those folks are saying, yeah, maybe we should be wearing masks, maybe we should take this pretty seriously. Surprise, the science is the science. And here we are. So, we see Florida doing some of the same stuff. There's video of the governor of Florida basically jumping up and down saying, ha ha, look how great we're doing. This is just a couple weeks ago. Hello? Hey, is my food downstairs? Wonderful. If you could just leave it at the desk, that would be perfect. Hey, thank you so much. Bye. I am ordering Indian food in Texas. So, thank you, Grubhub. Shout out. So we have video of the governor of Texas jumping up and down saying, look how great we're doing. Nah, 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 nah. Well, ain't that a bitch? Yeah, and it's in some ways it's hilarious, in other ways it's incredibly sad, because this bravado, this anti-intellectualism is killing people. It's literally killing people. And if this was just people doing stupid stuff, like putting a gun in your mouth and pulling the trigger to prove how wise you are, oh well, you're only affecting yourself. It's the problem here is that these idiots aren't just harming themselves, they're harming the person who's next to them. They're harming the person that they work with. They're harming their kids, their grandparents, their neighbors. There was, I think it was an 11-year-old that passed away last night in Florida. Yes, they had other conditions. So what? If it's your 11-year-old, how okay are you with them dying if they have other health conditions or they don't? This is shockingly sad. It's terrible shit. And so here we are. And we keep making these interesting mistakes. So when it became apparent that Texas was boiling, and that Florida was boiling, and that both states were up against it, Texas seemed a little bit more, I guess, maybe contrite, and showed signs of backpedaling, which made it easier for me to get in the door. They made changes that allowed nurses from other states who had the ability to come in and help. They opened up the doors and made it easy for me to come in as a experienced nurse and work in their state with the approval of their state nursing board. The company that I worked with in New York, I was contacting them pretty early on, and it was apparent that they were going to have a presence here in Texas, and here I am. And some other folks that I worked with in New York are here. Some other folks that I know from back home are either en route or attempting to look at some of the things that they might be able to do here. Other companies are now starting to get into Florida. I don't know how long I'll be here. My guess is 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I initially signed up as an ICU nurse, a role that I'm perfectly comfortable playing, and I'm sure I could have taken care of business for them at a high level. Today we went in and did our orientation. We did some onboarding, got our pictures taken for our smiley happy badges. They told us, this is how you do an AccuCheck to find out what somebody's blood sugar is. We did a couple of question tests. We did a little med testing. They found out if we could add and subtract. We did some COVID swabbing to see if we're sick right now, um, which actually turned out to be kind of interesting because I was one of the few, if not only, person that they had been working with who had verifiable positive antibodies, which meant, and I told them right up front, I was like, yeah, you can swab me, no problem, I don't care, but I might swab positive. I had it, apparently, and I got the antibodies to prove it, which caused some consternation because I actually, their director of nursing came down to talk to me, and they were like, "Yeah, don't let them swab you if this happens again, because you're going to swab positive." And so, do you have your documentation? I was like, "Yeah." So I emailed her the documentation, showed her what I had, and she's like, "Okay, you're fine, you're good." So yeah, so we did all that, got that stuff out of the way. We actually had an interview process, which was kind of interesting. They sat me down with a little team of their nursing managers, and they started asking me questions about my experience and what I felt comfortable with. And they were surprised and excited to know that I had emergency room experience because pretty much everybody in the door is a pretty experienced ICU nurse, and they apparently are telling me that they are having immediate and terrible needs in the emergency room. And I was like, I can help there if that's what you need. And they said, well, can you triage in the emergency room? I was like, yeah, I think I can handle that. And we got there. And so took me about 30 seconds to become an ER triage specialist, I guess, is what I'm going to be primarily doing with these folks. But and that'll probably change. It'll be like New York. One day they'll have me work in the ER, another day they'll have me work in an ICU. I'm going to be like the village bicycle. Everybody's going to get a turn. And I'm okay with that. That's my position here. I'm here to help these folks, to try to, bring some of the things that I learned in New York here, if possible. Share some of that. Here to be labor, here to be a resource. I'm here for whatever they need. And I'm going to nod, smile, and do the best job I can for them. And, I'll be here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, and we'll see what happens. So I guess that's about it for now. Interestingly enough, this has become a 17-minute chat, but my food's here, so I just meant for this to be a little bit shorter, but I ramble. So we'll make that's it for today. I might do something else later tonight. Drop me a note in Facebook Messenger, or text me if you have my phone number. Whatever, shoot me some questions about all of this COVID stuff, because I'm happy to offer some insight, because Lord knows I can just talk forever about whatever. But I'm happy to share some thoughts and some of the better stuff that some of the better conversations we've had. More interesting conversations have been based off questions that people have given me, so please do that. I think, I'm supposed to, whenever I do a YouTube video, hit that like and subscribe button, or share, or whatever, I don't know. Yeah, so I guess that's it for now. So yeah, I'm here in Texas. Started out in New York, back to Ohio, now I'm in Texas. Who knows where I'll go next? Could be California, could be Florida, could be Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a big spike in numbers today, but oh well. At least that'd be a short drive, right? So thank goodness Ohio's doing well. Thank you, Dr. Acton, Dr. Amy Atkin? Whatever. So, okay, that's it for now. Take care, guys. Have a good one. We'll talk more soon.